Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, imagine, if you will, if things are just a little bit different. Say you've had some sort of traumatic event in your life recently. Could be the loss of a job, loss of a loved one, a plane crash, automobile crash, um, you name it. Financial disaster, your house burned down. Something happened that kind of changed your life. It was a divergent event. Your life was going this way, and now it started to go that way. Changed your life in some significant manner, and it's left you with some emotional trauma, to be sure. Shortly after this event, maybe right afterwards, maybe a week afterwards, a month afterwards, something happens that you cannot explain. At some point, maybe during some kind of emotional stress, you find yourself in a place that should be familiar. You were just walking around the corner, but things are different. They're not the way they should be. It seems like you're in the right place, but where are all the people? Everybody seems to be gone. Or you'll find people huddled around in alleyways, starving, kind of a state of panic. Maybe you find yourself in a place which it's home, but it's in the midst of an ice age. Or maybe it's incredibly hot. Maybe you find yourself in a familiar territory, but there seems to be a state of martial law declared. And people are talking nonsense about some kind of invasion and a war with an alien species. Maybe there's people talking about a black hole coming. Maybe there's no children. And not so long after this event, called First Fall, you can't explain it. You find yourself back home, or back in what you think is normal reality. And it's possible, not so long after that, you start to notice that things are just a little bit different around you. That in some way, reality seems to be wrong, or your thoughts seem to be affecting it to some degree. And at some point, somebody, maybe a couple somebodies, approach you, and they say they're from this group, that they can help you. And you might want to come with them, and they'll explain everything and offer you a job. And they start to explain to you that you're somebody called a nearsighter, that there's only a certain percentage of the population, less than 2%, I believe, that have an anomaly in their hindbrain. And this allows them to travel between alternate parallel worlds, and also allows them to have some abilities which alter reality and make them special, unique, and different. Maybe this one group says that you're free to refuse their offer, but they're going to keep tabs on you. They're always going to be around, and if you can reach them if you need to. Maybe another group contacts you and says, you're really not free to go at all. Come with me. Well, if this is happening to you, you're playing the game Broken Rooms by Grey Mulligan Designs. And so today I'm going to talk about the unusual powers and abilities. And talk about words like distance and depth and meridians, prime qualities, and momentum. So you're also going to be tortured by my amateurish editing skills, because there's no way I'm going to be able to do this in one shot. So strap yourselves in, and we will talk about momentum. Characters in Broken Rooms are called nearsighters. They are members of the 1.3% of the population that has an anomaly in their hindbrain. They are HBA positive. And what this does for them is a couple things. It allows them to travel throughout the near side. They can visit all 13 variant Earths, including Earth 1, which is presumably the real world. They start out with a quality called distance of 2. Distance represents how many of these variant Earths you've visited and become attuned to. So, in the beginning, you've just visited 2. Your real world, and the one you experienced in that bizarre event known as First Fall. So, you start out character life with 1 meridian, and these meridians are what the powers are called. It's called your prime meridian. So you select a prime meridian, and you also select in that meridian and that meridian alone what's known as a prime quality. There are 13 meridians. I'll go through them really briefly. And each meridian has 3 prime qualities, and that's just something you're going to focus your energies in more. That's your real shtick. And when you select this meridian, this prime meridian, and this prime quality, that's not just a power. This is kind of representative of your character's personality. You have to kind of think long and hard about the skills they have, just kind of what kind of sort of person they are. You can make it line up with their skills, or it can be something different. That's just something they're kind of compelled to do. But this really affects the sort of person they are, so it's not something to be taken lightly when you first choose it. As you gain more points of distance, you're going to gain a secondary meridian and a tertiary meridian. The differences in power between those are a few different things. Essentially, with your prime meridian, you're going to have that prime quality, which is going to give you a 1 die bonus when you do stuff related to that. Also, in your prime meridian, you're allowed to create effects through this kind of free form, we'll call it a magic system when it comes right down to it, that require 5 successes, which are just freaking amazing at that point. Just once in a lifetime, like, holy crap, what the heck was that? In your secondary meridian, you're only allowed to create effects up to 3 levels of difficulty, which are still pretty freaking wild. And in your tertiary meridian, you're only allowed to create effects up to 2 levels of difficulty at the very most. So you're not going to gain those until, like, I believe it's like 4 and 8 points of distance, respectively. I'll double check in a moment. But anyhow, what are these powers, these meridians? And you're just pretty much called what your prime meridian is. So you can be a blocker, where you're slowing people and objects, hampering travel. You can be a breaker, where pretty much you break stuff. You break people, break objects. You can enhance entropy. You can be a chancer. These are the people that kind of affect reality. They're the guys at the gambling table that can make the roulette wheels stop at a certain spot. They're the dice people. We should love these people. Changers, which are kind of like the alchemists. You change things from one thing into another. Closers, which, they're the guys that can hold the portal, close all the windows in the place, just lock everything up tight. Finders, these are searchers. These are people that just find stuff out no matter what it is. The juicers, which control electricity and electronics. The keepers, which they're the opposite of the finders. They keep things hidden. You can choose a prime quality in keeping called the Waldo. Where's Waldo? You just kind of blend in with the crowd. They're the menders, and these are the people that can fix people, fix objects. It's very intuitive. The movers, which you can shift people and objects, facilitate travel. The openers, which can just open those closed portals, get their way into places, and even cause broken rooms to cycle early, where closers can cause them to close early. Readers, which are allowed to read people, read objects. They can hack into computers just with their mind, that sort of stuff, find information out. And writers, which can alter the information in people's minds, change your memories, change what's on the computer, that sort of thing. So these are the kind of powers, if you will, that are suggested by the meridians. And then actually using them is kind of a free-form system when it comes right down to it. It's based on what you're trying to achieve. And then the game master will assign a kind of difficulty. And it has an entire chapter on using these meridians in terms of, okay, it's very similar to something like the magic system in Desolation and Ubiquity. Not surprising, because Cramelkin Games, same company, where you kind of choose, okay, what kind of effect do I want to have? It gives you some sample effects for each level of difficulty, the number of successes needed for each one of these meridians. And it kind of gives you this kind of framework about what it's supposed to be like, and then that way, between the player and the game master, you can kind of decide, how difficult should this really be. So let's talk a little bit more about all this stuff. Everything in Broken Rooms is fueled by momentum. Well, what the heck is momentum? Well, mechanically, momentum is just an in-game, resource. It's a currency. It's something like style points. It's something like fate points, or edge, or luck, or inspiration, when it comes right down to it. But in terms of what is it really, it's different. I don't want to say unique, because there's got to be something out there that there's thousands of games and heartbreakers too, so it can't be entirely unique. And something can't be very unique now, can it? It's either unique or it's not. It's novel. It's different. What does momentum really represent? It represents this kind of stored energy in your siders. Regular people simply do not have momentum. This is what kind of sets them apart from other people. Momentum is gained in a couple different ways, mostly by kind of risking your life, by putting yourself in kind of like life or death situations where you have to push yourself really hard. And you're not pushing yourself hard in the way that a style point Ubiquity would have you do, where that represents your extra effort. It's really representing this kind of arcane, bizarre, psychic something in the character that is causing you to perform at this higher level. It gets generated by these life-risking, behaviors, this kind of thrill-seeking behavior when it comes right down to it. Because in this game, you're not really rolling dice unless things are really important. Most things are pretty easy to do. So when it comes right down to the point where you're doing something really clutch, that's when you're generating these 13s and generating momentum. The other way to generate momentum is to travel to a different variation. And when you travel through a broken room, you have all your momentum, bumped back up to maximum. What's maximum? Maximum is twice your distance. So starting characters start out with a distance of 2, so they're going to start out with 4 points of momentum. Now, you need to have a point of momentum banked, at least 1, in order to use a meridian. You may generate more points of momentum once you've actually used a meridian. Now, the thing is, once you have successes, you're trying to do something. Let's say you're trying to do something that involves, it's going to be a difficulty of 2 successes. Once that happens, you actually need to spend points of momentum to fuel or activate those successes to make them real. It doesn't come for free. So it's not like other skill rolls where, once you have a success, that's great. You actually need to use your momentum. You may find yourself in a situation where you need 2 successes. You only have 1 point of momentum banked. So you're really rolling dice, kind of gambling that not only are you going to get at least 2 successes, but you're going to roll at least 113 to get another point of momentum so you can use it. But momentum is, it's different than other in-game currencies. Not in terms of how it works mechanically. It's similar to other things. But in terms of what it actually represents, it represents this kind of bizarre, like I said before, arcane, psychic, something different about the characters. Now, momentum can cause some problems too, because there's something called frame dragging. The more momentum that your character has, the more reality is just kind of wacky around them. And this really kind of depends, upon their prime meridian. If they're an opener, things just may be opening around them all the time if they've got a ton of momentum. And it's not really spelled out exactly. There's not like a real scale or algorithm to use, in terms of numbers. This is something you kind of have to figure out, which I like. It gives you this kind of vibe. Like I said, this game has a lot of nuances. I could talk about this game for 3 hours, and I don't want to make a 3-hour video about momentum, distance, and depth. But there's a lot of kind of gray areas. There's areas that have, numbers spelled out, and there's things that are a little bit more up to interpretation, which is pretty cool. So that's called frame dragging. You start to alter reality around you. You can bleed momentum. There are times when you maybe want to hide, because there's something called nearsight, where nearsighters can find each other. They can it's like this big giant homing beacon. A torch or bonfire or something. People can spot your momentum from a mile away, especially finders. So you want to bleed momentum out, and there's various activities based on what your attributes and your prime meridian is to kind of bleed things out. This is a lot of fluff, but you may decide you want to bleed all your momentum out so you're harder to find, and you're not having this pronounced frame dragging. However, you may find at some point that now you're living this boring life, and you're always kind of drawn back to the near side. And so one way or another, you become addicted to risking your life, putting yourself in crazy situations where you're going to roll a lot of dice and generate more points of momentum, or traveling to another variation. You can't stay away from the near side for too long. Oddly, distance is not something that gets increased via experience points. Like most games, you can gain experience points through gameplay, but use these to buy things like better target numbers on your concentrations, on your skills, so you don't need to roll quite as high of a number on each individual d12 to generate a success with that die. You can even spend them on your concentrations within your meridians, so that you can get better at performing those by needing a smaller target number. Even if you roll a success on one of those d12s, you still need to fuel that success with a point of momentum. That doesn't come for free when you're actually using meridians. Distance, on the other hand, that gets increased by actually visiting and becoming attuned to the various variations, of which there are 13. So the maximum distance you can have is 13. And it's a little bit less codified in the book about like how you become attuned to a variation. They give you a basic framework, but it's not like a numbers thing. It's a matter of spending some time there, becoming changed, having some kind of events happen, and having the become attuned to that variation. So it's up to a little bit of interpretation, which I think is pretty cool. Now, having more distance is both good and bad. You get more distance, you get more depth, you get more momentum, you can start to gain more meridians, you become more powerful as a character. However, there are some negative aspects, like frame dragging, where you start to affect reality more and more around you, in keeping with your prime meridian, whether you want to or not. And sometimes this can be really inconvenient. Like if you're an opener and your shoelaces keep on coming untied and you keep tripping over them, that would suck. Of course, it can get a lot worse than that. There are some great things. You can actually start to do things like gaining and creating a talisman or a trinket. And these are things that can hold more momentum, more than your body can hold, or things that can hold actual effects, from your meridian. So it's kind of like creating a magic item. Some of these can actually become artifacts. You can find artifacts from other non-player characters that were nearsighters, especially when you go to a place like the Reef, Variation 13. And that's more of a setting thing. So I'm going to make a setting installment, so just a little tease about these variations because they're wacky. And let's see what else that's positive. You can actually gain positive distance qualities, which means you actually get to add more dice first to your primary meridian and then to your secondary meridian. So you become even more powerful. And you can even add it to your prime quality of your prime meridian, or you can create like another quality that way when you roll dice and you do something else related to that prime meridian, and then later on to your second meridian. Do that instead. You have to choose between those and talismans and trinkets. It's either or. Do I want the magic item, so to speak, or do I want to be more powerful on my own? And there's pros and cons to each. Then what's another negative part of distance? Distance itself. It's not named distance for nothing. You start to relate to other people less and less. You start to become a little bit weird, a little bit whacked out, a little bit obsessed with things that are just, reality just seems, you become more attuned to reality. But this is bizarre reality. And you're less attuned to what seems like the normal world. You can't relate to people as much. You start to lose dice on social rolls. And at the point where you have a distance of 13, you've made it. It's like the equivalent of getting level 20 in something like Pathfinder, D20 game or whatever. You become a non-player character. You are so weird and so whacked out, you are no longer suitable for play. First time I read this, I laughed out loud. I think it was awesome. This crazy twist. When you finally win, you lose. I thought that was pretty neat, but it's an interesting little twist on the game. So distance is both a positive and a negative quality. It represents becoming more and more powerful, but also becoming more and more detached. And I really like that vibe of the game. It has this real kind of Frank Black Millennium sort of thing going on with that as you just start to get more and more disturbed. One of the cool things about Broken Realms is it's full of nuances about how these meridians and distance and depth and all that stuff works. And one of my favorites is what they've done with prime meridians and prime qualities. Now, that's definitely part of the whole mojo of the system, where you're going to activate your prime meridian and prime qualities and do all kinds of nifty, psionic or psychic or whatever you want to call it stuff. It's magic-y. But it's also, because your prime meridian and your prime quality kind of define what kind of person you are, when you're making regular skill rolls that have nothing to do with these powers, that's going to kind of leak over into it a little bit. So I'm going to give you examples from the quality of the meridian of Keeper. So say that's your prime meridian, and you've chosen one of these three prime qualities. You can either be a cloak, a waldo, or a wig. So I'll talk about what happens when you're just using regular old skills, and this kind of psionic stuff just kind of alters reality around you as you're doing it. If you're a cloak, this is going to provide you with a 1 die bonus to things like tracking or computer skills. So you want to conceal your identity. So say you're a computer hacker, you're just trying to, be sneaky, have some kind of great firewall, whatever it is you do with computers. But you get 1 more die to that if you're a cloak. You're not invoking any kind of meridian. It's just this altering of reality. It's just kind of, that's your mojo. If you're a Waldo, one of my favorites, the face in the crowd, well, it's a stealth thing. So you get 1 die bonus to any kind of stealth rolls. And if you're a wig, well, you're a master of disguise at that point, and that just kind of pervades everything you do, altering reality, so that you get 1 extra die to things like mimicry or disguise rolls. I think that's really cool. Speaking of cool, it's not really fair for me to just kind of leave you without giving you an example of what these effects of this psionic, magic, psi, whatever kind of system, momentum system look like, the cool powers. So, and I give you some examples straight out of the book. The other thing to remember too is, as you're rolling all these successes, and once again, you roll the successes, but you still have to fuel them with momentum. They don't come for free. That they can be affected or modified by things you would think of, like distance, number of targets, the duration. It's a free-form system. It's a free-form magic system when it comes right down to it, if you want to kind of wrap your head around it. So it is open to some negotiation, and it's like anything else, you develop a feel for it. And so I can kind of see how how it would be really easy to kind of, through practice, kind of wrap your head around it. You do a few practice sessions. One of the things they talk about in the text, though, is that the lower the number of successes needed, that the more that these effects could kind of be explained away by somebody as being, it's plausible. That's kind of weird what happened, but there's got to be a rational explanation. Once you get to things needing 4 or 5 successes to have them happen, yeah, people are going to have a hard time explaining these away. So let's talk about a chancer and what some of the things they could do. With 1 success, they can maybe win a hand of cards, make the right choice when there's only 2 choices, okay? Or anticipate another person's next action based on their previous actions. It's plausible. 2 successes would be help somebody choke on the food that they're eating, or make a cold shot, 1 threshold before below what the size would normally dictate. So just really good at this cold shot. Or making a non-meridian skill check at the trained level, 8+ level. Just how did you do that? 3 successes? Well, they could greatly increase the probability that a rickety structure would collapse right now. or greatly increase the odds of a machine malfunctioning, like right now, or cut the correct wire on a bomb when you're trying to defuse it. Is it a red one? Yeah, it's a red one. All right, formidable. 4 successes needed. Making it rain. Skies are cloudy, downpour happens. Big winner, you break the bank at any casino. You just walk in, you can do that. Or turn a botch into a success when you're rolling, so avoid an accident. And just ridiculous, then you're talking about things like substantially increase the probability of an earthquake occurring right now. Substantially increase the odds of a plane crashing right now. Or ensuring that a mortally wounded person somehow miraculously survives. Now, these are meridian effects. These are things that, like, the greater and greater number of successes needed, the harder it is to really kind of explain that sort of stuff away. At the end of the day, Broken Rooms is this game that has this really compelling dichotomy kind of going through the entire thing. And the Meridian magic, whatever you want to call it, system, is no exception. There's this part of it where it's a bunch of codified rules, and this is how you do this, and this is the target numbers you need, this is how many dice you need to roll. And then this is part that's a lot more free form. You got some guidelines, but then you kind of fill in the blanks, So you have these characters that, have these unusual, bizarre powers, and they're able to develop them through time, not just through experience, but by traveling to these other worlds. They're able to alter reality, not just by exercising these powers at will, but sometimes because that's the kind of person they are. If I'm a Waldo, I'm a person that's just really good at stealth. I probably have a personality that makes me hide in the background and just blend away. I'm probably someone that does not stand out in a crowd and doesn't do anything to stand out in a crowd in the first place. And sometimes what happens is, unintentionally, I start to make other things disappear as well. The more distance I gain, the more that I seem to make things invisible. So it's got a lot of interesting stuff going on. I can create effects at will, but sometimes they just happen. And sometimes I'm unsuccessful, but sometimes I can do the absolutely amazing. Sometimes it's based on the numbers, and sometimes it's based on this dialogue, with the game master and I have, where we kind of figure out what's going to happen. So this is just one part of the game Broken Rooms that's really compelling. And I haven't even gotten to the setting yet, and that's the part that really hooked me. So I'm going to talk about that next.